This time on Poll Hub, technology. It could be a double-edged sword, but would you be able to give it up even for just a short time? We take a look at neo-Luddism and weigh in on whether or not neo-Luddites have the right idea. And here's a question for you. How would you rate your driving skills? Better yet, how would you rate your driving skills in comparison to other drivers? We share public opinion on that topic, as well as the perceived driving dangers on the road. Finally, Lee has a hefty fun fact. We explain. This is Poll Hub. Let's hit the road. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Mary Griffith.
I'm Neil Viswanathan.
I'm AJ Gambino.
And I'm Lee Berengoff.
Well, technology has often been a topic of conversation here at Poll Hub, but what if we got rid of it all and took the approach of a neo-Luddite? Do you think you could last for just 1 month without the internet or technology? Those are just a couple of questions here, but let's start off with some facts. First, let's take a look at the definition of a neo-Luddite. Neo-Luddites are a group of people known for opposing the rise of many modern technologies and are concerned about the impact they will have on people, communities, and the environment. So let's go back to April of 1997, when a poll sponsored by Privacy and American Business and conducted by Lewis Harris and Associates found that 57% of Americans felt that the internet was useful, but they could easily do without it. Only 36% of Americans said that the internet had become quite useful to them. Today, nearly 96% of Americans say they use the internet, and that's according to Pew Research. And in fact, a third of internet users around the world say they could not survive more than 5 hours without access to the internet. That's according to an October 2014 report from Tata Communications. So Lee, let's start off with you. We often joke around and call you our resident Luddite, but in fact, you are quite adept at certain communications. So do you think you could go without technology for just a short period of time, specifically the internet?
One is open to criticism when one doesn't pull out an iPhone and take a quick peek every now and then. And I think we've become totally, as we've weaned off of TV and, appointment news, we now do lots of information, communication, and, it's sort of a machine person who is always with us and can always verify things, hopefully accurately. Although I'm very often asked what's the sources. The answer to the question is no. I check it constantly, although I must say I'm amazed at how many hours per day I average when it tells me, you've done 7 hours. And I say, my God, really? Yeah, but the other thing, though, I am the resident Luddite because I, after all, am aware that the Luddites date way back in time. And the Luddites that we reference from then really go back to the 1800s in England. You're going to like this research. And I did use the internet to find this out, incidentally. But Ned Ludd was an apocryphal apprentice and a legendary weaver who supposedly lived in Sherwood Forest, next door to another resident of Sherwood Forest by greater fame. But anyway, that's where it was. And there was a rebellion, oftentimes very much often put down by the authorities to challenge these machine wreckers who were very fearful that they were going to basically get dealt out of the economy by automation. And so it goes back a long time, and the references you have now are, hey, we're in a much more different time period, but the argument's the same. Are we going to be dealt out, or how dependent are we on this kind of technology? So the answer is, yeah, we're really dependent.
Well, Lee, I wanted to ask you about, from a public opinion and polling perspective, over the last 30 years, are you surprised by this change in public opinion toward the internet, or is it really just a utilitarian opinion that as Americans, as people worldwide became more used to the technology, they were more likely to use it, and now it has become a necessity?
Yeah, and if you look on a college campus, I mean, in a sense, us older folks, we're the contemporary Luddites on campus relative to what the students are doing and just how much is being done there. And then, of course, now the whole discussion of AI. And, there's an expression called Luddite fallacy, which is kind of the notion that we're going to have fundamental structural unemployment because technology is going to replace jobs, period. And I think what we found is that, yes, there is that element, but it doesn't eliminate all positions. It just sort of distributes it unequally. So there are things that are no longer possible for careers, but yet other things are now open and available as a result of technology. So the job market follows what's available technologically.
As you point out, Lee, we are at Marist University and we are surrounded by younger Americans. So let's bring in Neil Viswanathan, our student producer, who is a regular to the podcast, and wanted to talk to you, Neil, about your generation. And just want to put a number out there first that as of 2023, nearly all U.S. teens say that they use the internet every day, 96%. And the share of teens who report being online, quote unquote, almost constantly has roughly doubled since 2014 and 2015, 24% versus 46%. Now, you are past your teen years just slightly, but talk to us about the dependency or lack thereof of your generation on internet, AI, and other types of technology.
Yeah, I feel like my generation is in kind of an interesting spot because we were born with the internet. Like the internet existed when we were born. However, it wasn't nearly as like pervasive as it is now. So like I remember, being in elementary school, even middle school, and like the internet was obviously around and I used it, I would say nearly every day, but it was a lot harder to use. Like at school, if we wanted to use a computer, you had to go to a computer lab still. Not everyone had personal laptops that they could just use all the time. So I think even over the past 10 years that were mentioned in that statistic, I've really seen an increase in reliance for my generation. I've noticed it with myself a lot too, like simple tasks every day. I'll catch myself and I'll be watching TikTok while I'm brushing my teeth and stuff like that I definitely wasn't doing 10 years ago. I think part of that might be due to short form media becoming a lot more prevalent. Like it's a lot easier to have something like that in the background than a long YouTube video that you actually have to concentrate on. So I've definitely seen, even just the past 10 years, a lot of new innovations kind of changing the way that we live, possibly for the worse.
Do you find that perhaps there's a downside to all the technology that you and your contemporaries are engaged with?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think a lot of it might have to do with younger kids almost. When I was a lot younger, like my generation, we still played with toys. Like we didn't really have, at least until we were past, I guess, like iPads and things like that didn't really become relevant for like much younger children until after people my age were already past that stage. So I still remember playing with toys growing up and reading a lot of books and watching like PBS shows and stuff like that. I feel like that was a lot better for my development, but I have like younger cousins and like they pretty much had an iPad in their hands since they were born. They don't really play with toys as much, or if they do, they become disinterested very fast. And I feel like that can't be great for development of younger children.
Well, what about you? Do you feel like you can't live without your technology even for a short period of time?
I do. I definitely feel like that. Like I said, like I'll catch myself going on TikTok or doing other things on my phone just while I'm doing daily tasks. And when I don't have my phone on me, like it almost makes me kind of anxious. Even if it's just upstairs and I'm going downstairs to get a snack or something like that.
Can I bring it with you? I was just do you find that this technology in terms of communication, do you think people are communicating more with their friends and people in the workplace, or less, and they're more isolated and doing more remote things? Because you could go either way with this in terms of the technology. It connects you, but also can provide independent, private avenues.
I definitely feel like there's a trade-off there. For example, like at the poll, right? Like I work some days remote and I work some days in person. Mm-hmm. And new technology has allowed people to work remotely. But I do notice that when I'm in the office, the days I'm in the office, I'm much more productive because I speak to everybody else and we're able to communicate on ideas much better than if I was remote and I don't have all these distractions.
Well, I want to bring in politics for just one moment with Governor Kathy Hochul, New York's governor, proposing a ban on cell phones and other internet accessing device while on school grounds. That's for New York State school children. Now, there is some support for the idea of banning cell phones in the classroom. According to an October 2024 Pew Research survey, 68% of adults, American adults, favor the idea of banning cell phones in the classrooms, but only 36% support banning them for the entire school day. Now, I will say personally, my older two boys have cell phones, and Neil, to your point, they are constantly on their cell phones. They would be constantly on their cell phones if we don't limit the amount of time that they are on them. And so with that, but their school, they go to a parochial school, and if they bring their cell phone to school, their cell phone is taken from them and locked up in a lockbox until the end of the school day, at which point that they could have their cell phones back. And I think honestly that that's a good idea because they're not distracted. They still do have access to school issued devices where they could do research and work. But, previously when cell phones weren't confiscated, they were texting parents, not my children, but other students were texting parents, were communicating outside of school. And so it did serve as a bit of a distraction. So, Lee, what do you think about the proposal?
I think it's going to play to mixed reviews by generation. And I think that younger folks are not going to be happy one bit by it. And as Neil just said, he gets anxious going downstairs for a snack if he's not connected somehow. So, and I actually feel that to some degree too, because things are occurring in the political world or in the world of sports, and you sort of want to know about them as they're occurring. This plugs you into real time. But if you're trying to teach and kids have their laptop open, you want to make sure they're taking notes on what you're saying in class, not checking out something else. So you really don't, you need eyes in the back of the room, as it were, to watch the front of the screen. So there's a little bit of a conflict there.
Well, I don't think that there's a danger in disconnecting a little bit. So maybe we could adopt the neo-Luddite approach somewhat.
Next, we're going to delve into a topic which the original Luddites would strongly oppose, which are the roads. Most people are convinced that they're great drivers, but just ask them about everybody else and suddenly it becomes a disaster. This contradiction, known as illusory superiority, is fueled behind frustration, road rage, and risky driving behaviors. Whether it's aging cars with outdated safety features or simple overconfidence behind the wheel, we're going to take a closer look at public opinion on the state of the roads. Driving is as American as apple pie, but it wasn't always this way. In December 1937, Gallup found that 63% of adults drove an automobile, while 37% did not. Fast forward to today, 95% of U.S. residents ages 16 and older drove at least occasionally in 2023, unchanged from 2022 and 2021. And at least 92% of American households own at least one car, based on the last census. Here's where it gets fun, however. In December 2024, YouGov released a survey of over 40,000 U.S. adults asking how they would rate the average driving ability of people in their state. 9% said excellent, 33% said good, 37% said fair, 12% said poor, and 5% said terrible. But when the question became personal and they were asked, how would you rate your ability to drive a car? 47% said excellent, 36% said good, 7% said fair, 2% said poor, 1% said terrible, and 6% said that they don't drive. Speaking of perception, in August 2024, a Pew Research Method study reported that 49% of Americans today say that people in their community are driving less safely compared with 5 years ago. With that being said, Lee and Mary, you guys have both been on the roads a lot longer than I have. Have you guys noticed a decline in the quality of driving that is consistent with these statistics?
I totally have noticed. And I think one's own sense of superiority feeds the notion of road rage, because if I'm such a great driver, look at what that jerk is doing. And so, I pull over to get away, if someone's coming down the middle of the road, sort of, I pull over to the side and I watch to see whether the other person feels they own the road or not. There's a lot of stuff going on. And it just, having occasional policemen out there to, give tickets doesn't really get you away from the road rage, which I think has really taken off lately. But Mary, what do you see? We're both highway people. You drive a little bit further than I do. So what are you catching?
Yeah, I spend a good deal on the roads. And I will say that I think I'm a good driver. I don't think I'm an excellent driver. Because I do have a tendency sometimes to pass people. I can be a little bit impatient. I think it takes a lot for me personally to get to the point of road rage, but I have noticed reckless driving, and I can pinpoint a spot during my commute where there are cars that just weave in and out at excessive speeds, and I get angry, and it makes me nervous. But in terms of just whether or not this is a broader issue, I think part of it may have to do with increase in traffic that I've noticed. I've noticed increase in traffic, increase of road work. I think people are becoming more and more impatient with the experiences on the road. And also, whether or not there's a sense that the quality of driving has become less safe, I think it has to do with those individual experiences, because those are the ones that really stick with you. I mean, if everything's chugging along nicely and everyone's playing by the rules, there's really nothing to pick up on. It's just, everyday behavior.
Yeah, I wonder also whether people, if they've experienced getting in an accident either through their own fault or through somebody else's fault, whether that influences our outlook on these things, and also just how you learn. I mean, my father many, many, many decades ago taught me how to drive, and basically, said, you got to drive through 2 winters here in the Northeast until you can consider yourself a driver, because you got to get into some situations and work your way out of them. And the other part of the car, of course, is the backseat driver, and that's a whole different phenomenon I'm not going to touch.
Don't touch that, Lee. Don't. But Neil, I think you have some poll numbers in terms of safety and what drivers think in terms of what creates unsafe driving conditions.
Yeah, out of 6 dangerous driving behaviors, Pew Research asked about that in August 2024, and people driving while distracted by a cell phone topped the list, with 78% of Americans saying that this is a major problem in their local community. 63% say that speeding and aggressive driving, such as tailgating, weaving through traffic, or running red lights, are also major problems where they live. Around a quarter of Americans, 27%, say that they see road rage extremely or very often. Another 45% say that they sometimes see this, and 28% say that they rarely or never do. Throwing it back to 1937, Gallup asked Americans what they felt the biggest cause of automobile accidents were, and 29% said carelessness, 24% said drunken driving, 20% said speeding, 10% said reckless driving, and 4% said inexperienced drivers.
Nothing about the cell phone on that.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that distracted driving doesn't surprise me as topping the list today. I mean, that's something that I think all of us, to a certain extent, I'm not going to speak for you, Neil, but I will speak for Lee and myself, that it can happen that you become distracted, whether it be by technology or something else on the road or, even a conversation that you're having. That is certainly a danger, and that's what I would place highly as well. In fact, not in terms of using cell phones, but one of my sons, while driving the other day, took a look to his right and saw a bus driver steering with his knee. And he became a little concerned about that. And, I kind of had to squelch it a little bit. But Lee, do these results surprise you at all?
No. And I think that, thinking you are a good driver and thinking the other guy isn't is probably just a natural reaction. And I suspect, all these potential problems from carelessness and I'm guilty of this as well. It can be tired or, the cell phone is sometimes handy and you sort of just take a quick peek. And that's very dangerous.
No, Lee. No.
My last two and only tickets in memory were for that. So I'm definitely not using my cell phone at all when I'm in the car.
Well, Lee, before you get yourself into any more hot water, why don't we move on to the fun fact today?
Okay, so we are going to stay with this driving topic and ask the results of a question that collected way back in 1939. Do you think freight trucks should be kept off highways during certain hours on Sundays and holidays? And the answer was 62% said yes, 30% said no. So those freight trucks, flying on by on my Route 84 are very concerning, and they do get your attention when they come rumbling on by. So I'm not surprised about that. And I think today you'd find exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree, Lee. I think that a lot of that I would say that, yes, there should be a limit or restrictions on when freight trucks can be on the road. I did a little research and, take it for what it's worth. But I think that there are some safety concerns about this when there's more traffic, when there are more drivers on the road. Mm-hmm. When you think about it, when there are more drivers on the road, there's more congestion. And so, people are stopping short. There's a greater tendency for accidents. And when you have vehicles that are transporting, large amounts of goods, it can complicate things a little bit more. So, Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I do get scared by driving next to the big freight trucks and 18-wheelers. For me, the most terrifying part is when you're in between two of them.
Yeah.
So I definitely would not be opposed to keeping them off the roads at certain hours. But I also do know that, that's a vital part of our economy, goods getting to and from places. So that's necessary. How do you feel about this, AJ?
Yeah, I see both sides for sure. I find them to be kind of terrifying when I'm on the highway. So on a personal level, I would be in favor of it, but I think it's also important to think about how much that would impact the flow of goods and the economy, because I'm sure it would be a significant impact.
Well, also think about this too. The time frame that this question was asked was 1939. Back then, the roads weren't nearly as developed, weren't as connected by a car. And so think about how concerned and frightened we are when we're stuck between those two, tractor trailers, Neil. And think about what it must have been like, smaller, if granted smaller freight trucks, but still much larger on a, newer.
Relative to the roads, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going down the Sawmill Highway last week, and I see, and there's no trucks allowed on that. So that's kind of a nice thing. So you have don't have to worry about this problem on some of these roads. And there was a truck on it, and he was stopped right before an overpass, and the truck was not going to make it through. And so it was rather clear. I went somewhere and I turned around and came back about a half hour later, and I was wondering how they're going to get this truck to back up into the highway to get. And what they'd done was they just pulled him off to the side of the road, and I suspect that was a whopper of a ticket this guy got for being on stopping traffic and doing all kinds of things that they probably would have thought twice about in the future. But so it's definitely an issue.
And it seems as though among the four of us, there seems to be quite a bit of consensus on this question. So until next week, keep on trucking.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Neil Viswanathan, Hunter Petro, and AJ Gambino.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.